I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Okay, hey everybody. So if you remember our very first episode, those OG fans of ours of The Weekly, the Weeklyans? I don't know, I just made that up. You'll know Alex Halverson. He was a business reporter for the Puget Sound Business Journal at the time, and he just got a job at Seattle Times. So he's a business reporter over at Seattle Times. I wanted to give him a shout out. He was so instrumental in getting this podcast up with his advice and kind of just encouraging me to do this. So shout out to him. And I will have him back on in November, so that'll be fun. How much we share about some behind the scenes, I'm going to have to talk to my legal counsel here off the air and see what I can and can't share. But who I have here today with me is Kathy Surace-Smith. She's the former Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Legal Affairs for NanoString Technologies and currently serves on the board of the Fred Hutch Cancer Center. Hello.
Hello, Rachel.
How are you doing?
Great to be here.
Good?
I'm excited. This is my first podcast ever, so I'm raring to go.
Awesome. And we're here back at the World Trade Center, Seattle. Shout out to Allison Scott for letting us use this space. Beautiful view, beautiful day today, so we're appreciative of that. I moderated a panel, The Women Who Lead in Law, I believe it was. And yes. Every time I moderate a panel, I always want my panelists to share their stories and kind of like stuff they shouldn't talk about. And you know who is hard to get people to talk about things they shouldn't?
Lawyers.
So I remember that panel very specifically because I was like, can you guys share like maybe a little bit more? So we'll see what we can get out of you today.
Yeah, it's a professional virtue, I think.
I know, you're just too good at your job. Let's do a little bit about you. You have over 35 years of experience working in high-growth private and public companies in the U.S. and Europe, including over 20 years working in life sciences specifically. You were the board chair for Fred Hutch and now a current member on the board. You're a member of the UW Medicine Advisory Board and a trustee of Columbia University, as well as an advisory board member and former co-chair for the Behavioral Health Catalyst, which seeks to improve investments and policies in Washington State's behavioral health system. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
And we're going to get a little bit more into what you're currently doing, I know. But when you look at your history in your LinkedIn, you have a long history of working both in the legal system, but also specifically in life sciences. So why are you passionate about that?
Yeah, I have, it's now closer to 40 years of experience, half of that in life sciences, as a lawyer, as an in-house general counsel, and other functions as well. But I was drawn to life sciences 20 years ago by the mission, by the concept that we can either through medical devices. I was at a company called Sonosite in Bothell, which was acquired by Fujifilm for 10 years, and at NanoString for 11 years, which is a life sciences research company, either through actually selling and developing medical devices used on patients or through the research, we could save lives, we could improve treatments. And that's such a powerful mission, such a powerful calling to get up every day and work with a team of people to do that. So that's what I became passionate about. Although I showed up every day as a lawyer and a general counsel, I also got to work with teams across the company and learn the business and, help in various ways. So that's why I'm passionate about law, because it enabled me to find the things that I think I could focus on that were important to me.
I love it. Well, I'm glad you're in the industry. Okay, we've got 5 stories for you today. One is the NanoString update. I am so excited about this. The next one is Mod Pizza is selling to some other company, another restaurant group. The third story is that there's a new aquarium here in Seattle. 4th story is about a discrimination case. And the 5th story is about Costco raising their membership fees. So are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready.
All right. So I put this in here. It doesn't have an article connected to it, but again, I make the rules. So we have to talk about it. If you remember, we covered this in an earlier episode. It's the week of April 29th with James Falzone. If you want to go back and check it out, it's the first story we talk about. And I'm going to do a recap for you. But NanoString is a Seattle company, and they make high-powered, high-tech imaging and research tools, which I will be calling fancy microscopes because that's how my brain can understand this. So basically, and you can jump in and correct me, but this is what I understand happened, is that a San Francisco company called 10X Genomics, which we'll call 10X, sues NanoString saying, hey, you're using our ideas to make these fancy microscopes. And then because of that legal battle, NanoString couldn't sell their products for a while. The legal fees were insane. And it basically causes NanoString to file for bankruptcy this year and then essentially has to sell to another company to get out of the bankruptcy. A few curious things about the situation is that 10X, that company, has only been around for 10 years, whereas NanoString's been around closer to 20. Mm-hmm. And 10X generates 3 times the revenue as NanoString. So, why are you picking on them? And then the other thing is that 10X has filed lawsuits against 3 other biotech companies. So when we did this episode with James, we were basically it sounds like they're being a bit of a bully. So you're here today. You left in May for NanoString.
I did.
You were the general
After
counsel.
the sale. Yes.
So take us to that time. What was going on? What was your specific role? I'm sure you were dealing with it for years.
Yeah, happy to do that. I'm going to caution, though, that I will be conscientious about not straying too far into what's happening now and in the future, because I'm not there anymore.
Sure.
I can talk historically about what's on record, and certainly I think everything I will say today has been said publicly, either in the media or in court, where those are public filings. So you're right. We are in a field sort of a fancy microscope, but really called spatial biology, and think of it as the GPS for biology. It enables you to see molecular activity in tissue samples. Really important if you were trying to figure out biological pathways for certain diseases or for cancer, if you're trying to come up with drugs that might be impactful because someone has a particular genetic dysfunction. So very, very important scientific research field today. And 10X really has engaged in what we regarded as a weaponization of litigation, suing many of its competitors, refusing to give us licenses so we can continue to operate and pay them a royalty. And our view at the time was that they were really seeking to put us out of business. And they almost did, but they didn't succeed. And they have had some success in their litigation, and frankly, 2 of their wins have been reversed by higher courts in Germany and in the Unified Patent Court in Europe. You're right that the litigation cost tens of millions, but what really made it difficult for NanoString to continue to operate without going into bankruptcy was a $30 million judgment in Delaware court last November. And that was something we just couldn't, frankly, afford. And the thing about bankruptcy, we went into Chapter 11, which allows you to restructure your business so you can continue after you come out of bankruptcy or sell your assets to another company, which is what NanoString did. And it also pauses litigation, so it gives you a breather. So you can step back, restructure your business, see if anyone's interested in buying. And it turned out to be actually, although a very expensive step, and we can talk more about bankruptcy is its own sort of industry. Yeah. It did enable us to get that breather, to restructure, to find buyers. And we were sold to Bruker company and through an auction process run by the court. And I think we all feel really good about the way that ended. The assets of the company are now owned by Bruker. They're continuing to operate NanoString in Seattle. Mm-hmm. They continue to employ 99% of our employees. Our manufacturing operations are still in Bothell, headquarters in Seattle. And it looks to be like it has been a really good fit so far. And customers are thrilled because because of some of the injunctions that were happened in Europe, they were unable to continue to access our products. Yeah. But once those injunctions are lifted, in fact, there was news today that the one in Germany has been lifted and we can now sell, NanoString can now sell in Germany. Our customers are back in business, and that is the best news of all. So that's kind of the story from my perspective.
Did you say that you offered to pay 10X?
We always are open to a license, and we've requested a license, and they refused. No. And I know that I believe other competitors being sued also asked for a license. So this was a David versus Goliath kind of battle, and it was unfortunately we came out. I unfortunately came out on the losing end. At the time, tide seems to be turning, and obviously Bruker now has acquired as the litigation in addition to the assets. but they have deeper pockets and can help continue to fund that fight.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping to see the $30 million judgment in Delaware, hoping to see that overturned. Those, my understanding when I left was we were still waiting on continuing motions with the Delaware court to ask them to invalidate the jury decision in that case. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. So you mentioned Bruker came in and bought you, and then I saw on these articles almost immediately the CEO and CFO. From the articles, it sounds like they were fired, and we were just talking a little bit about, like, oftentimes when a company acquires another company, they already have a CFO, so they don't want your CFO. Mm-hmm. So was that pretty expected? Was that kind of surprising? What was that like?
Yeah, there was a small group of executives, myself included, who we knew that we were not going to continue on, that our functions were, as you say, there were already those functions existing at Bruker. And so, the decision was made to leave. There were no positions for us there anymore. So that's very common and understandable, because the new company really wants to install its own management and perhaps have a different way of running the company.
Yeah. And if you were already a CFO, they'd want, well, you can be a senior director or something. You're not going to take a lower level position, right?
Exactly. And we, the group of people that worked with us there that remained were just stellar. So they are stepping up. I had a successor in the legal department who has stepped up, doing a magnificent job. So it wasn't like there were too many holes left.
So you left in May, and I have to ask, is there anything that you can share now that you're not working for them? Maybe something that was left out of the news articles or the way the story was told that you want to kind of correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think in reflecting, just my own personal reflections, there are probably two things. I think one is we got through it because we hung together as a team, because we were resilient and had a lot of grit. And that's not just the management team dealing with the litigation, the bankruptcy. It's the entire company had our backs. And that was so important. And I was thankful for that. It's a great group of people. Mm-hmm. And secondly, it really makes you humble. We had been doing well. We are a 20-year-old company. We went public in 2013. We had been public for 10 years. At one point, our stock was up to $60. I mean, you have those high-flying times, and you realize how quickly things can change. And I think that really humbles you and makes you understand that, you can't always expect things to go up. Sometimes they go down. But you take the blows as they come. You manage them as best you can. And I think we ended up in a good outcome, and an outcome where all the company's debts will be paid, as I understand that process, which is still continuing in bankruptcy court. Shareholders are the ones that lose out in these situations. And, there could be a small payoff for shareholders, but we won't know until the bankruptcy process is finished.
Yeah, Kathy, you have such a better attitude about this than I do. I'm just still mad at them because there's this amazing company in Seattle and they just took them down.
I know. Well, I've had, they first sued us in, I believe it was 2021. So I've had a lot of years to subsume the anger, put it into productivity and move on. But yes, it still is an infuriating situation. And it speaks to some of the foibles and weaknesses of our patent system, which we can talk about, but some of those patents never should have been issued. They were overbroad, or they were not properly in accordance with the guidelines for patents. So there are some times where the patent office doesn't get it right.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of patents, I wanted to get your opinion on this. For our last episode, we were talking about owning an idea, and in terms of the arts, if you own a choreographed move or a piece of music, is that really helpful for the arts community as a whole if only one person has it? So I'm curious your thoughts on, patents in the life sciences realm in general. Do you think it's a good idea that 10X can just own this one way of making these fancy microscopes and you can't, or what?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you get a patent on a specific invention. And the patent application actually you have to show that not only did you invent something, you reduced it to practice. You can actually make what you invented. So you can't patent an idea. You patent a very specific method.
Okay.
So there are various methods of doing spatial biology. They got some very broad patents. And they also went out and bought patents or licensed patents from other companies, or acquired them by buying the companies, and then made changes to those patents and used them to sue all these companies. That is what is really sort of disturbing here, that they specifically targeted, let's get these patents, let's study our competitors' products, get these patents, and try to cover their products. Now, they didn't do a great job because we've been able to, succeed in Europe and hopefully in the U.S. as well in overturning these judgments. But there was a pattern of targeting competitors. Our view is, let's compete on the merits. Let's give scientists options. It's better for them to have different spatial biology solutions they can choose from.
Totally.
Let's not try to knock your smaller competitors out of the market and then dominate that market. So one thing that I will add to these litigation is that NanoString has a counterclaim in one of the litigations in the U.S. in a trial coming up in the fall that is an antitrust claim about their monopolistic behavior.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. With the court allowed us to bring that into the litigation, and it'll be litigated, and we'll see what the decision is in, again, another Delaware federal court, same judge as the last case. And that is going to be interesting. But we felt so strongly, and I know others in this mess feel that same way. And many of our customers felt that way and actually issued a letter saying, this is not the way to do it. This is not the way to limit scientist option is not the way we want to see things develop in this market.
I agree, and I'm glad you guys are taking action. I didn't know that part, so that's awesome. So why did you, it sounds like you're saying you left because there just wasn't really a place for you.
Yeah. And I've been there 11 years, and our CEO had been there 14 years. So for me, it was actually a good transition point.
Yeah.
And see what, after being a general counsel, being a lawyer for almost 40 years, what's next? What do I do next?
What is next?
I don't know. It's only been 2.5 months. I have taken the time. I promised myself some time off to enjoy the glorious Seattle summer. I have been traveling, and I'm back to enjoy the summer. And, in the fall, I'll start to have those conversations, start to think about it. I don't know. What I do know is I want to work with people that I enjoy. I want to work on something that is really important and has a mission associated with it. Those are non-negotiables. The rest is, I'm open to it.
I love it.
Whatever comes, things that come along. I'm very, I'm not excluding anything at this point.
I love it. Yeah, we'll keep an eye. And definitely, you've earned your time off, so definitely enjoy it.
Thank you.
I know we spent a lot of time on this one, so we're going to go a little bit faster on these other ones.
Okay.
But thank you so much for sharing your insights on that.
Absolutely.
I've been dying
Happy
to know.
do it.
Okay, so our next story is Mod Pizza sells in the wake of bankruptcy rumors. So basically, just days after Mod Pizza is qualified or allowed to file for bankruptcy, a California company comes in and purchases it. If you're not familiar, Mod was actually founded in Seattle by a husband and wife, Scott and Allie Svensson, in 2008, and then they grew to 500 location chain. They were really successful. Things are going well. In fact, they were doing so well that they got a $160 million investment from private equity. Drink every time we talk about private equity. Just kidding. So they expand their location. The goal was to expand to almost 1,000 locations. And they're preparing to go public in 2021. So even with the pandemic, they're thinking things are going well. But then Scott, the CEO, steps down in January, stores start closing, and then this bankruptcy, and then the Elite Restaurant Group, California company, buys it. So I couldn't quite figure out what exactly the reason was for them going up and then down. I know the article cites that possibly a big part of their experience was dine-in experience. A big part of why they're successful is their experience for dining in. People maybe aren't doing that as much. I don't know. We can speculate. But what I want to know from you is, obviously you've dealt with bankruptcies, but how bad does it have to be for a company to file for bankruptcy? And what are the requirements? I mean, how bad did it have to be? With 500 locations, I feel like they could have just closed some, but...
So another example of a great company that was flying high, and then as we talked before, the world changes on a dime. And I think for them it was a combination of higher labor costs, probably, and there has been a decrease in people dining out. But I know Mod Pizza well, went there tons when my kids were younger. Actually, I was there a few weeks ago in the Bellevue location, and I give them kudos for building. They were one of the first to build fast casual dining where you can customize, the Chipotles of the world and the Sweet Greens. Mod Pizza was there early, and they found a market niche. So kudos to the Svenssons for building that business, and I sympathize with them. Your question, it's basically when you can no longer pay your debts. when you're insolvent, your debts exceed your assets.
Even if you
consider bankruptcy,
take out a loan or defer some payments.
You can if someone's willing to lend to you. That's the problem. There are people who come in and look at your business and they'll say, "Oh, sorry, this is too risky."
Yeah.
So yes, I'm sure they looked at all the options. Everyone does. NanoString did as well. People do still regard bankruptcy as the last straw, the last step in a process of trying to keep the company going. It's never the first, but. Not knowing the details, they were able to avoid bankruptcy, which I mentioned is a very expensive process, and get bought. And hopefully the new buyer will be able to keep it going. It sounds like they've closed a lot of locations in recent months, but I wish them all the luck because
I do too.
It's a great company. And the other thing, they also have another part of their mission was hiring young people who may not be traditionally educated, may have had some issues growing up, and trying to help them turn around their lives. So I always admired that. I always thought that was a fantastic way to bring those kids into the market and give them jobs.
So one other question on this. I know some people listening own their own company. They're building up their own company with goals of selling it and getting acquired at some point. What are some things when you're looking at those contracts and those conversations that you think business owners should look out for? Or maybe there's some things that you should absolutely have in that acquisition conversation. What have you seen?
Yeah, the agreements are pretty standardized to some extent. The lawyers will spend a lot of time on representation. So the company being sold will make a series of representations. It can be as many as 40 different representations about different aspects of the company. You spend a lot of time making sure what you're saying is accurate, because if they're not accurate and you find out later they're not accurate, you could end up in a lawsuit. Price, obviously, is the biggest one.
Yeah.
But, it's usually... it's a lot of cultural issues, like are you aligned on the vision, or the thesis for the acquisition? Why is this buyer buying this company? Where does this company fit in their vision of going forward? Or what are they going to do with the company? How are employees going to be treated? Which employees are going to be retained? What do you do with your executive team? So there's, beyond the agreement itself, there's a number of issues outside the agreement that drive a lot of how M&A is done.
Yeah. I know we were talking about the Bartels, Rite Aid buying Bartels. I think we talked about that a couple episodes, and kind of citing cultural differences. And it's a huge part of it. I agree.
Yep.
Okay, our next story. Enough bankruptcy. Let's talk about a fun, happy thing, which is the new aquarium. And we're actually sort of close to it. But the new aquarium is opening August 29th. They just announced their date. It was after a $160 million expansion. And it's going to be the region's largest tropical reef ecosystem with sharks and rays and more. It's part of the massive waterfront redevelopment we've been talking about here when they tore down the viaduct and they're redoing it all. And the rooftop will be a public park. That's what I got from the article. I don't have a lot to say on this, just I think that it's important for people to know that this is happening. It created a lot of jobs. It's going to be great for tourism. I'm excited for the park and getting people down to the waterfront and downtown. What are your thoughts?
I'm super excited. I love aquariums. My husband and I are boaters, recreational boaters. So when we're out in the San Juans or anywhere in the Puget Sound and we see orcas or we see other wildlife, it's such a thrill. I mean, we're so grateful to live in a place so beautiful. So I'm super excited. I did read the article and and there was a video on there, which I thought was great. Everyone should see that video. It is a beautiful, beautiful building. And what I really loved is they actually have the aquarium faces out to the public. So anybody can walk by and see this new exhibit and actually see the fish without going inside and paying for it.
Oh, that's
so there's
smart.
a public, and I thought that is brilliant. Bringing the museum out, and maybe that brings people in, right? So kudos to whoever designed it, and I'm super excited to go and see it.
Yeah. But you've got that don't have a 9-to-5 job glow of just, you know what I mean? I remember like the aquarium's coming. Everything's
terrific.
Everything's
I'm gonna
great.
Go to the aquarium.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next one is the discrimination lawsuit. So, sorry, we're going back down. The former chief product officer at Mozilla is suing them for discrimination after taking medical leave for cancer treatment. He was a former Microsoft, Facebook, and Twitter executive in the Seattle area. He joined Mozilla in 2022 with the understanding that he would be the next CEO. He proceeds to get high marks. They open up a Seattle area office. Things seem to be going well. But a year later, he's diagnosed with cancer and he takes a 3-month medical leave. And then he comes back. But while he was on medical leave, they assigned a different CEO. That current CEO steps down and they assign a different one, which I think is interesting. And then when he does come back, they demote him and they say, if you don't want to take this lower level position, then we'll have to talk about a severance package. There's a little bit more in that article about other things that happened, but that's kind of the gist. So as legal counsel, do you think he has a case? Based on just reading the article? You're going to hate
my answer because it'll be a lawyer's answer. But, having worked in companies and seen all kinds of claims, I've not litigated a discrimination case like this. But there's always two sides to every story. I mean, on these facts alone, it sounds like a very sad situation and a troublesome situation. But I have to believe the company has a different view, and a jury will decide this.
Yeah.
I will say, as former chair of the Fred Hutch Cancer Center and as a current member of the board, there are increasingly more and more people surviving cancer, and I was so glad to see that this person had survived and he's doing well. And they will continue to have challenges, and workplaces have to be prepared to deal with challenges because often the side effects of treatment are pretty serious. So it's another challenge for HR professionals and in-house lawyers, but it's one that we should take on and manage just like we manage all the other individual issues that come up with employees. Employees are humans, and everyone has different needs and different potentially different problems that do come into the workplace. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see. They may decide to settle it. Often these cases do settle, but it's hard for me to have an opinion one way or the other from whether he actually has a case or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does kind of bring up for me, what's the burden of proving discrimination? So, like, were you fired because you're gay, or were you bad at your job? Were you fired because you had cancer, or were you not a good fit and had a bad attitude? Like, we don't know. So how do you look at those cases? Is it just a lot of documentation that you were good at your job? But then on top of that, let's say you were really good at your job. You had all these documentations of high marks, but it's an at-will state. So couldn't you be fired just because they don't like your attitude? Couldn't they fire you for any reason?
It's an at-will state. You can be fired for any reason. But there is this theory of unlawful termination. And so you still have to be careful not to unlawfully terminate somebody. So it's complicated, but I will say that HR professionals typically will insist and coach people to document. Poor behavior, poor performance. Without that, a company is exposed to legal liability if they terminate somebody, and they also, often a company will settle because there's no documentation. So it depends. If you're, often people like this, they, will be terminated for poor performance, or they'll just be terminated. Their jobs will be, disappear, and they'll be given severance. Mm-hmm. So there are different ways that companies sometimes deal with these issues.
Yeah. Okay, our last story is Costco is raising their annual membership fee for the first time since 2017, so just about 7 years, and that goes into effect September 1st if you're a Costco member listening. And as a reminder, Costco is Issaquah-based, so that's why we bring it into the fold today. It's raising it from $60 to $65 for memberships, and then for the executive membership, it's going from $120 to $130, so raising it $5 for most, and then $10 for that executive membership. I was able to call my mom today. She worked at Costco in the membership department for 20 years and retired from there. So I called her, and if she approves of me playing a recording of the conversation, I'll play it now.
I think people love Costco, and they will continue to shop at Costco. But not only that, members have discounts in the warehouse, but they also have several discounts outside the warehouse, as in services offered. So, I think they'll still save money.
That's my mom's take on it. Do you have thoughts on this?
I agree with your mom.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I came across an article that was published a couple of weeks ago where there was a survey of Washingtonians. They were asked, what did they think of different big companies in the state? And Costco had a 90% approval rating. So I don't think anybody's giving up their membership for a $5 differential. I haven't been to Costco in a couple of years because of work and because weekends are very busy in the Costco's near me. So
It's like an
now that
anxiety
I
attack.
don't have a 9-to-5 job, I joke that I'm going to be one of those people who shows up at 10 in the morning, spends a couple hours at Costco tasting everything.
Oh my
so
God.
I've got that on my bucket list for the next couple of months. I'm going to show up at Costco and just
I'm going to be there.
see
and
what
you're
it's
gonna be-
like at 10 in the morning. I'm never on a weekday. I've never been there 10 o'clock
Oh my
on a
God.
weekday.
I
So-
feel like I'm going to go in there and you're going to be wearing like a Kirkland hat and a Kirkland
Right,
sweatshirt.
right,
and you're just
exactly.
going to be like, hey, Susie. Hey. Like, oh, there's that Kathy girl again. Cool. Yeah. What else did I have on here? Yeah. I think they're going to probably wait more years before they increase. I don't think they'll keep doing
Yeah,
this
I
every
think
year.
I've read the last increase was 2017. So that's a good amount of time. That's 7 years.
Yeah. One other question. So this is Costco, but I got an email today about Peacock raising their rates from $5.99 to $7.99. Obviously, Hulu's been raising their rates.
Yes.
I think Amazon Prime's talking about raising their rates, or they did. If you were on a board of one of these companies that's talking about raising their membership rates, what kind of questions would you'd be asking in this room?
I think why is the obvious question.
Yeah.
And I would expect the team to come in with a financial analysis and a customer analysis and a market analysis. I mean, these things are not done lightly, especially streaming services, because people drop streaming services all the time and then they re-up for a month because they want to watch a particular show and then they drop it again. So I think there's a lot of price sensitivity around those, particularly if someone's subscribing to 3 or 4 or 5 of them. I'm assuming this is a conversation that is had in the boardroom before this happens, and
Sure.
there is a rationale.
But what if the answer is just like, we want more money? You know, do you feel like that's probably happening in some of these
I
companies?
think that probably is not. I think there's probably justifications because you don't want to drive customers away. You want to keep them. So I think there's a delicate balance there.
Yeah, I know, because I think I would pay $2 more, but if it's a $30 increase, you know.
Right.
I don't know about that.
I don't think there's a lot of sensitivity because streaming services always talk about how many customers they have. It's a metric they're judged on. So I think that they are sensitive to fluctuations in that.
Did you ever watch the Movie Pass documentary on Netflix?
Which one?
Movie Pass?
No.
So basically you can pay, I don't remember what it was, but a pretty low amount, and you can go to as many movies as you want in any theater. And it wasn't financially making any sense.
Right.
But they
I remember
already
that.
started at such a low price that in order to rectify it, they were losing people because they're like, well, we're used to paying $20. You know, we don't want to pay $100 or whatever it was. So you can kind of get yourself into a bad situation if you start too low.
Exactly.
Just to get members in.
Exactly.
And then how do you sustain that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, cool. Well, this went so fast. I want to give you a chance. Is there anything that you want the audience to know? Any advice for them? Anything you want to plug?
You know, I've been spending a lot of time just thinking about the politics of our country right now, and it's a tough time. I think in so many ways. So I think I've been guilty of perhaps strong rhetoric regarding certain candidates in the race, and I just have had a chance to step back and think about that a little bit, about how we're talking about each other and to each other or not to each other, and wanting to sort of step back and try to understand more about how people are thinking about why they support one candidate versus the other in a way that I will confess I did not have time or energy to do before. So I think as we head toward the next few months, which are going to be tough months, I think, for many reasons, I would just say let's all try to tone down the rhetoric and be a little more empathetic for each other and just hope for the best in November, whatever the best is for you, and hope the aftermath of the election is also a peaceful transition. And I think that's the main thought I would leave readers with today. Or listeners, not readers, listeners.
We're the readers. They're the listeners, yes. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. And thank you again to the World Trade Center. This has been really fun.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you, Rachel.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.